Hi class, welcome again to another session on rehabilitation engineering. So today let us discuss the principles of rehabilitation engineering. In the previous videos we have already discussed the principles of assistive technology. So let us move to rehabilitation engineering, which is slightly broader when compared to assistive technology. So as a rehabilitation engineer, you have to have certain key elements for design procedure that should be included while you're trying to find out a solution for optimal solution for your patient, right? So these steps are analysis, synthesis, evaluation, decision and implementation. So if you follow these steps correctly, then you can offer an optimal solution to the patient which would improve their quality of life in the future. So let us move on to analysis first in this video, and then we shall discuss synthesis, evaluation, decision and implementation in the next video. So often when you are an enthusiastic rehabilitation engineer, right, who is new to the job and who is not very experienced, then you come to a conclusion very quickly, right? You do not thoroughly think of what are the possible consequences that it face about your decision because you're not experienced enough, right? So you wouldn't actually know the consequences. So it's just a trial and error thing, right? When you are very young and immature. So as you grow in your job, right, you see more patients, and then once you see more patients, you come across the same condition again and again, and then you are in a better situation to take the correct decision, right? Also, you learn from your mistakes, and if you have a good mentor, then they would actually share their experiences with you. So that would actually make you wiser, like you can take better decisions if you have a good mentor and when you grow in your job, right? So the requirement to do a careful analysis is often realized by an inexperienced new rehabilitation engineer when they've had a few ineffectual sessions, right? The patient is coming to you, you're having a go at whatever ideas you have, and it is still not working, means that's frustrating for the patient, that's frustrating for you as an individual. So after that, you realize that you need to dig deeper into the problem, right? You have to analyze the problem more thoroughly. You have to make sure that you understand exactly why you're going wrong. Why your methods are not working is something that you need to analyze. So therefore, a thorough analysis of the problem is necessary when a rehabilitation engineer seeks answers to a few questions. So, in order to do a thorough analysis, you have to have a set of questions that you need to ask yourselves and ask the user. So, what are these questions? So, first of all, when, where, and how often the problem arises. So, is it a problem that is always occurring? Is it a problem that is occasionally occurring? Is it a problem that is occurring only when a patient is in a particular place at a particular time? Right? So these questions you have to ask them, and then you don't have to like physically watch exact. Sometimes it helps physically watching exactly what the problem is, but it's not necessary that you'll have to always watch it physically. Like it's not possible for you to be present at all the time with a particular individual. So you can ask them to probably record the session for your reference. They can record a video and let you know, or or if it is possible, you can go and visit them while the problem is occurring, or if it is possible, if the problem occurs in front of you, you have a visual evidence that yes, it is a problem that needs to be sorted out, right? So what are the environmental constraints, right? So a problem occurs only when there are certain environmental constraints such as the size, location, speed, personal interface, etc. So what might work in here might not work when they're at home. So why is it not working at home, right? What environmental conditions are affecting the performance of the device or performance of the rehabilitation therapy? That needs to be analyzed. And then what are the psychological constraints, right? What are the level of patient's cognitive thinking? Whether the user is able to use your technology effectively, or whether the user has some other preference and you are just entrusting your ideas on them. All these needs to be considered. And last but not the least, the financial consideration needs to be taken into account as well, right? Because everyone cannot afford everything. So we have to make sure that whatever solution we are offering is affordable to the patient, is useful to the patient, and is improving the patient's condition, or it is alleviating the patient's problems. So an optimal solution can often be reached by making a list of operational features that the ideal solution will possess. Right? So suppose I have these, this, and problems. So the ideal solution should alleviate all these problems. So what are the operational features that my device should have in order to nullify these issues? And then once I have the checklist, I can proceed further with synthesis of the synthesizing my idea, like trying to develop a product out of my idea or whatever, right? So let us take an example. This was taken from your textbook. First, this was the problem statement is to develop a set of performance specifications for an electromechanical device to raise and lower the lower leg of a wheelchair user to prevent edema. So often edema occurs when you're seated for a long time. I mean, if you are having a flight journey for say 18 hours or something, you're traveling somewhere far away and you're seated for 18 straight hours, you can, when we as normal people can realize that our legs are swollen. So imagine the condition that, imagine what happens to a person who's seated in a wheelchair for all day long for months together. So their leg is always in the body is always in the seated position. So obviously there'll be quite a lot of fluid accumulation in their legs. Also the blood circulation effects, and there's so many contraindications because of that. So if we are to develop an electromechanical device that will straighten the leg of the wheelchair user and lower it back to the seated position, then what should we consider? So first of all, we have to consider the time duration for which the leg is raising, because a shorter time duration is just going to make them sit erect with their legs extended in a very short period of time. So sudden change in position can result in discomfort and can result in certain contraindications in the patient as well, right? Because suddenly, if they're seated, then that can affect their blood pressure because it's a sudden movement. It can make them feel giddy. It can make them feel uncomfortable. It can make them vomit. So there's quite a lot of contraindications for sudden change in position. So that should be kept in mind. So the next one is the user should be able to operate this feature independently. Like every time they want to raise their leg, they don't want someone to come and press a button for them, or they want someone to come and switch the thing on for them. So whenever they want to stretch their legs, they should be able to do it on their own. So how do we do that? We can have a user interface that this particular user can use. So if their arms are okay, they can use a button or a joystick, right? Or if they can't use their arm, they can use their voice, right, to do so. Or they can have some visual some visual signals, or you can make it or you can operate it through say in inertial measurement units, whichever thing you think whichever user interface you think is appropriate for that particular user that you're developing this device for should be chosen. So you have to do some study on that as well. So always you should include an emergency stop button, because suddenly, like for example, even after slow lifting of the leg, the user is feeling uncomfortable and wants to throw off and is throwing off as long as his leg is straight. That means there's a problem with the problem has occurred because he has lifted his legs. So if the emergency stop button is depressed in such situation, it will bring back him to his seated position, and then once his symptoms subsides, he can try and do it again, right? So emergency stop button is always very helpful. Suppose you are using electrical stimulation to raise and to dorsiflex and plantar flex your legs, and suddenly you feel electrical comfort, it's very uncomfortable, then you can press the emergency stop button, and that would stop stimulation immediately, and then you'll be relaxed, right? So emergency stop button is a very important feature. Then it should be compatible with the user's existing wheelchair. Like I said, just because we have a tech savvy device with us does not mean the user should upgrade his or her wheelchair, right? We are developing the device for the user. So it should be useful in his or her wheelchair. You should not say like, oh, I've developed this device, so better you shift to a new sophisticated wheelchair so that you can use this feature. That is incorrect, right? So it should be compatible with the user's existing wheelchair, and then operation of the device should not be noisy. You just want them to be on their own, even in a crowded atmosphere. Like you don't want the device to be very very noisy while the person is raising their foot, because that will make them very self conscious, right? And then the entire device should be lightweight, right? It should not be heavy enough. It should not be so heavy that the wheelchair is finding it difficult to locomote, right? Also, it should not be so heavy, the motor machinery should not be so intense that it is draining out most of the battery of the wheelchair, right? So it should not weigh more than a few pounds. So these are the features that you need. Now that you have this checklist, if you want to go and develop this electromechanical device, you can synthesize this idea, you can evaluate this, and then you can implement, and finally you can see how this device, you can take the decision, implement it, and finally see how this device works. So we shall discuss more on the other steps in the next video. Right now, take care.